Episode 2. Continuing the craft.
Hey guys, it's been it's been a month or so. It's been a minute. In case you've forgotten in the time that it's been, I'm making a crafting game, kind of focused around crafting various things and crawling through dungeons. Most games that let you craft things limit you to specific preset materials. For example, only being able to make like a bow in Minecraft with 3 sticks and 3 string. That is the only way you can make the bow, and there is no variance for that. In my game, though, you'll be able to craft any weapon using any material, and not just any material, but any combination of said materials. You aren't just limited to, say, a diamond sword. No, you could have like a gold and diamond sword, or maybe an iron and stone sword, or maybe a stone and gold sword. You can mix and match them to your heart's content, with every weapon being composed of at least 3 materials. These materials could all be the same, or they could be different, it's really up to you. Next up, we have the gameplay. You'll be put into a randomly generated dungeon and pitted against rooms of enemies. Clearing through the rooms will let you acquire items to make your current run more powerful, or find materials that you can bring back to your base camp to craft new and exciting combinations. I do have a lot of ideas for the future of this game, but that's just kind of like the general rundown of my vision. Right now, the game's pretty experimental and very bare bones, but that's the life of a game dev. We left off last time with some ideas I wish to enact, and of those goals, most have been either partly addressed or pushed to a later time, because right now I have made other more important improvements. What improvements, you might ask? Well, I won't spoil them just yet. The reason is that I first want to talk about development time. And I guess motivation too, although to a lesser extent. I'm currently in my summer break from school, something which, should grant me some free time, and I guess it does. But filled as it is with outside activities, I find it hard to fit time for developing this game in there, while also keeping my motivation high. Believe me, I want to keep making this game, and I swear on Skibidi I will, but it's a slow process, so give me some time. Anyway, I know that was a lot of random shit to throw at you, so let's take a quick break by watching some calming, what was it called again? Oh, right, yeah. By watching some calming abstract background video loop, ice blue white VJ loop motion background blue graphics 4K. So relaxing. Psych! We have a game to talk about! Hopping into the game though, you can see we have this oddly familiar title screen, because I haven't changed it. I haven't felt the need to because it's both too funny and not worth my time to change. So let's just get in here. So you'll probably notice a scene that's almost exactly like it was before, if not a bit smoother camera movement since I added, camera smoothing. The first big change comes here in the inventory, where we have quite a bit of a change. Now all of those old temporary textures like the baller and the Among Us, sadly, have moved on to the afterlife because I have given them actual textures. As you can see, these materials have, actual images, and so do the weapons. They all have colors and textures. I might redesign these, material textures. I don't know, I'm not the happiest with how they currently look as a rocket gold. I think they look kind of like crumpled turds or maybe crumpled paper. I don't know. I don't like how they look, so they're gonna get redrawn. But you with a keen eye might have noticed a missing item. We have your sword, spear, crossbow, but one of the 4 of the weapons from the last video is nowhere to be seen. Can you guess which one it is? Muy bien, the bow! Soy Dora! But yeah, the bow's gone. It was too similar to the crossbow here, and didn't really offer anything unique to the game. Don't be sad though, because there is something to replace it, and that, I hope, will be pretty cool. So if we head down to this crafter guy over here, still untextured, just using some default stuff, you can see we have the sword, the spear, the crossbow. And what's this? A new contender? I think we should make this new weapon, so I can show you what it is. And yes, I did keep these dev keybinds for spawning materials. It's too convenient. So let me just throw these in here, and let's craft the shuriken. Don't mind the sudden shuriken duplication, nothing's going on there. Anyway, Also, a thing to ignore, don't mind this jittering around, that's a bug that got introduced from the camera smoothing, I'm gonna have to sort that out later. Anyway, moving on. I'm gonna go through these weapons one by one, because I kind of skipped past it in the last video, and with the addition of the new weapon, I think it's time that I properly introduce them all. So, as you've probably seen, we have the sword, a classic slasher type attack. It's pretty basic, you've seen it around, I'm gonna move on. Next up, we have the spear. Slightly slower attack, with higher damage, and a longer but narrower hitbox to hit things. Moving on, we have the crossbow, a fast-firing ranged weapon that shoots arrows at a lower damage, like this. But now, the new weapon, the shuriken. And boy, are they a beauty. Let me just show you what it does. It throws a spinning blade that comes to a stop and deals repeating damage after set amounts of time. This is a slower attack speed and somewhat low damage, made up for by its consistent attacks. Also, you can see that it does go towards the mouse to an extent. It tries its best. Tries its darndest. Also, as a side note, if anyone has any weapon suggestions or item suggestions, feel free to comment them or tell me about it in my Discord server. I, have my own ideas, of course, but I always like to get community feedback on stuff like this. You see what people want to see in here. But I'm getting sidetracked. Let's move on to where even more content resides. Firstly, you'll likely have noticed the walls have become much nicer, It's no longer just the weird light and background that I had before, now it's their own texture. You might also notice the health bar, which I told you to ignore the jittering, of course, has been moved from around the player to the UI element. I folded. It just was too hard to keep track of when it was on the player, so it's been moved. And you might have also, if you had a keen eye, noticed that these rooms are actually bigger than they used to be before, by about 1.5 times, because I multiplied the size of all the rooms by 1.5 times to accommodate for a change which we'll get into in a second. And you, with even keener eyes, may have realized a lacking amount of enemies in the next room. And what would be the cause of that? Well, that, my friends, is because I have completely changed how enemy spawning works. But before I get into how all of the spawning and room interactions have changed, let me first give you a rundown of all the enemies that exist within the game. As I'm sure you're aware, we have a resident rat, which just chases toward the player and deals damage when getting close. More of a space filler enemy, there to pad out the enemy numbers. But right now, we have two new challengers entering the ring, the Spitter and the Boner. First up, we have the Spitter, a creature I alluded to at the end of the last video, and something that keeps its distance from the player and shoots, orange globs at them, spitting them. They try to keep their distance while also not straying too far, and they are definitely a unique enemy to add to my roster. And secondly, we have the Boner, Skeleton. This creature is slow-moving by default, and does no damage no matter how close you get, but every so often it will charge at the player at high velocity, and if you happen to be hit by it during that charge, then you will take some damage. This brings our mob count up to 3, although much more variety is needed for a fuller game. Anyway, now that you know all the new enemies, let's see them in action. Going into this room, I'm about to be locked in here, and that's a partial necessity due to a lag bug, but also a new design choice. The enemies will, as you can see, like this, the enemies will start spawning in from the Aether. Currently this all looks very bare bones because I haven't drawn the doors or enemy spawning animations, but those will come in time. Now I'm going to start engaging in combat with these creatures, and you'll notice that hitting things looks a bit cooler, taking damage especially, and also killing. These have all been made much juicier, and hopefully the game feel is much improved from when it was last time. And yeah, that's where the combat currently stands. But right now, we have something a bit more interesting. This here baller image on the ground is no mere baller image. It is in fact a chest that you can interact with. You can see it drops an item on the ground. It's essentially my first attempt at letting players acquire items in runs. I don't like the current implementation because it's kind of wonky, and I think I'm going to be reworking this alongside the item system, which I will tell you guys about in a second. Because friends, I ain't done yet, and we have new features that I've been working on that you haven't even seen yet. First up, we have this menu, and yes, this is another shitty looking menu. This one is actually getting scrapped though, because I have a better idea for it, but that's besides the point. I have a keybind, which I can press a few times, and if I start pressing it, you'll notice I start getting a bit faster, and a bit faster. This is because it's giving me a speed item, which does as the name says, and it just increases my speed. And when I reopen this menu, you can see I now have many of these in my item inventory, but don't get attached to this exact system because I have a much better idea for these items that I think is going to be replacing this current hack job. Next up, we have furniture/map decoration, something which I've been kind of chipping away at in the background. Nothing too concrete to set up right now other than, some basic code for when I get closer to being finished, but I've started to draw some various map elements that'll be placed around to add a bit more variety to the rooms. The first thing I did was the ambient floor decoration of the rug, something that's just there to add a bit of color to the floors and a bit of spice. The next thing I made was the barrel, a breakable object that will have a small chance of dropping something helpful, like maybe a healing orb or maybe an item. And the final thing I've drawn so far is just a few random beds, just for some more decoration. But you might be wondering after hearing those, why have I drawn such homey feeling things like the rug or the beds? Isn't there supposed to be like intense combat and death in a dungeon? It feels very out of place. And you would be correct, because I have an idea in mind for floor progression. Instead of just having a number increase to denote the current floor of the dungeon, or seeing what types of enemies spawn, or what power level you are, I want the decoration to change as well, with the first floor feeling almost like a home, then the next floor would feel like maybe like a dusty basement to that home, and then the next floor below that is like a chain-filled dungeon. Each floor you descend, I want the atmosphere to grow tenser and tenser with the decoration until eventually it reaches the point where you are in a pretty much hellish environment. I could also throw in some things like map hazards that maybe become more prevalent as you get further into the run. I think this will add a nice sense of progression to the runs aside from enemy/player power levels, the only downside being it takes a lot of effort for me to make such things. Hence, I am starting this process in the background and kind of focusing my main attention on other things, slowly chipping away at this problem over some time. This does mean that the floors will look quite barren for a while, but I hope that's acceptable as I continue. Now, I think I've pretty much covered everything there is to say. I mean, of course, I've done a lot of background work, things like, adding various levels of critical hits, or fixing random bugs, or rebalancing things to make the game feel better, or making hard decisions like removing the bow or reworking the item system, but that's all stuff that exists away from the main focus of the game, instead acting as the supporting structure so that my game can flourish. And since I'm kind of sweeping all that stuff under the rug anyway, I think I'm just going to talk about some other miscellaneous things. Like, for one, I plan to keep streaming if possible. I found it really fun to code the game live, and, even if I'm not getting much viewership, it just feels nice to do. To be fair though, I never really cared about viewership to begin with. I just like making things that I think are cool. To that end, I'm also writing a series called The Shambler, although it's a side project right now. It's not public, but if I continue writing it, I might do that. I just happen to find writing to be a fun thing to do, and it's a nice way to polish my skills while telling a cool story. But for other news, join my Discord server if you want a more close following of the development of the game, or just me and my projects in general. I post there often about the things I'm doing, so consider checking it out. Also subscribe, by the way. But I am done plugging myself. Or am I? To talk future plans for this game, I have quite a few. In fact, I have multiple documents entirely comprised of future plans, but that's too much to dive into at this moment. If we want to talk specifics, though, I think I can tell you about one idea I had, since it's one I was fielding earlier for feedback on my Discord server. Essentially, I'm not that happy with having a traditional roguelike item system, where you pick up an item and it just gives you buffs. While it is cool, and I absolutely love some games that implement a similar system like Risk of Rain 2 or Gunfire Reborn, which utilize this, I think it's a bad fit for this game. That kind of passive item system would cause the game to feel generic, and not just in terms of being uninspired, because if both of your weapons get the same buffs, then in the late game it removes weapon individuality. What I mean is that in the early game, the weapons you use are decently important as they each have their own strengths and weaknesses, but if the items are applied equally to both weapons, then the more items you have, the less it would matter which weapon you use for any given moment, as the two weapons would approach each other in functionality. If you get a weapon to shoot out fireballs whenever you attack, then both of your weapons will shoot those fireballs. The weapons just start feeling closer and closer to each other, and eventually they become similar enough that there just really isn't a point to swapping weapons anymore. And that's something I want to avoid. But all hope is not lost, because I've thought of a way to repurpose this item system from something that's generic into something that could add some spice to the game. I want to rebrand items into runes, and to have runes not be global. What I mean by that is right now if you pick up an item that gives you plus 10% crit chance, No matter which weapon you use, it will have that bonus crit chance. And right now, I think I can do something a bit better than that by having runes only applied to a specific weapon. In other words, that 10% crit would only be given to one of your weapons that you choose, instead of both. With my current idea, each weapon would have 5 slots, or something like that, for runes to be placed in, and you'd gain 2 additional slots for every floor you descend. This would mean you can't just pick up items willy-nilly anymore, and it allows you to specialize your weapons in that run for different purposes. Take the example of having a slow rune that slows down enemies when you hit them, and a rune that creates acid pools on the ground when you hit an enemy. You could decide to spread out the runes and have one weapon slow the enemies and the other put them in the pools, the slowness keeping the enemies in the acid pools for longer, or you could decide to put both runes on the same weapon, freeing up space on the other. But then you would take up valuable space that could be used for other runes to better synergize with the acid pools. It creates a balancing act, and more importantly, a player choice. Instead of items being a thoughtless process of picking up whatever's offered to you, you would now need to decide whether or not an item fits with your current build, if it's worth using a slot for, and how you want it to be applied. I think I like this idea, but I want to get some feedback on it, because I want to see what people have to say or see if it can be improved in any way. As always, you can comment down below or message me directly through Discord or my Discord server if you want to leave feedback. And yeah, that's one of the ideas I have for the future, but honestly I don't think I have time to talk about more right now because this video is already going to be long as hell and a pain to edit. So I think I'm going to end this video here. So see you guys later, be it in the past, present, or future. Hey guys, editing me here. You can see this is my little window in DaVinci Resolve. That was a long video. Definitely the longest video I've made on this channel so far. That's like actually like fully edited to my, I guess you could say, standard. This part isn't a part of the rest of the video, by the way. I'm just kind of doing this freehand. I don't know when my next upload is going to be, but very likely it's going to be a while because when I normally do my next upload, which would be, you know, I try to go for like a month between uploads, you know. A month from now, I'm starting school again, and I have genuinely no idea how that's gonna affect my ability to actually make a video. So that's cool. Anyway, I didn't really have anything else to say. Bye.